I don't remember what story that's for. Okay. Welcome back to my channel. I have upgraded with a fun little microphone that I'm going to be using for today. I think today is going to be a really fun video. So today we're going to go through my TBR. So these are the books that I still want to read that I have not read yet. Full disclosure is not the full list of books. These are just the ones that kind of piqued my interest. These are the ones that I have written down available. So that way I remember what it's about so I can decide if I want to read it. This is my TBR. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. Now I have organized these according to their genre. So first on the list is going to be my contemporary fiction pick. Let's go ahead and get started. So first on the list, I have a book that's written by a local author. It's 4 Years Trapped in My Mind Palace by Johan Twiss. This follows a boy. He suffers an injury when he's young that puts him in a coma to the point where he cannot communicate, but he can hear everything that's going on around him. As the years go on, his family, who has been very supportive, slowly starts to dwindle in their support and regular visits, things like that. So he starts to get kind of lonely, feeling like no one can hear him. And then one day someone does. And it's his new roommate, who is like a 90-year-old jazz musician who somehow can communicate with him in his mind. And so these two are able to communicate. It's very much a coming of age story from what I've seen, and it explores an end of life story, coming of age story, all wrapped up in one. Supposedly it's a very good feel good story. I actually bought this for my mom for Christmas, and she had nothing but good things to say about it. So this is one of the books that is on my TBR. Anyways, yeah, so hopefully it's a good one. We'll see. The next one, again, this is according to genre, not necessarily in the order that I'm going to read them. The next one is The Paradise Problem. This is a contemporary romance. It's written by Christina Lauren, and honestly, I found this book because I read The Unhoneymooners, and I loved it. And I felt like it was just a good, fun, rom-com type of a story. Essentially, all that I know about it is it's a woman who inherits like a bed and breakfast that's kind of going under in a small town. And so she's trying to figure out how to run a business. Romance ensues, yada, yada. I don't really know much more beyond that, but it sounds like a good time. And I've had a good experience with the author in the past. So The Paradise Problem is on my list for a good rom-com contemporary romance type story. There's another book on here. It's a contemporary fiction, not so much a romance, but this is called The Liar. And I, honest to goodness, don't know much about this one other than I saw it in my local bookshop and it looked really interesting. And on the back, it was kind of just following a girl who tells a little white lie that grows into a bigger white lie that grows into a bigger, and then it ends up leading to a massive kind of turn of events that throws the whole city for a loop. I don't really know much more about it, but it's kind of exploring the idea of like consequences of our actions and our untruths and lies and things like that. So kind of seemed like a fun one. I don't know, but that's The Liar. Diving into one last contemporary story before we dive into some other stuff. This one is Here for the Cake, and this story is kind of giving Anyone But You with Glenn Powell in it, at least my understanding. Essentially, you have a girl who is going to her sister's wedding, and her sister is marrying her ex-boyfriend, so she wants to be anywhere else besides this wedding, but she convinces, I believe it's an old college flame, to come along with her and pretend to like date her in exchange for like some work that he needs help with or something like that. So I believe Anyone But You is the movie that recently came out that's kind of like that, where they're trying to convince everyone that they're dating, and then, you know, they probably end up dating or something. I don't know. That is Here for the Cake, and it kind of seems like a fun one. I don't know. That seems like a good, happy, whatever. I could be totally wrong on all of these, and if you've read any of these and if my take on the stories are so messed up, don't ruin it for me, but I would love to hear your thoughts on my thoughts. Anyways, anywho, next story, and I think I've already talked about this one. I actually did an honest review on book 1 in this series, but the next book on my TBR is Invictus by Heather Frost. I classified this as a fantasy romance. The fantasy is, I would honestly say, like a political fantasy romance for this one. Very light on the fantasy, heavy on the politics, and heavy on the romance. But there is fantasy, so it still falls in that category. Essentially, this is the sequel. All we know at the end of book 1 is that Carver and Amryn are just starting to get to know each other, like for real, you know, they're married. And after a solid amount of time, they're just now starting to get to know each other. We're exploring their budding feelings. And some key people who are very important to this story have some very important secrets, and now we have to navigate all the politics of it. I really don't want to spoil book 1, so I don't want to explain what I know of book 2, and I really don't know much, but I know I loved book 1, and I have been not so patiently waiting for this story, but I want it to be good, so I'm torn. It's been like 2.5 years, and I'm ready. So hopefully this comes out in 2025, and hopefully I am able to read it. But that is Invictus. This next one is One Dark Window, and I want to read the whole, I think it's the Shepherd King series by Rachel Gillig. I want to read the whole series, so it's like One Dark Window, and I don't remember the sequel's name. I'll include it somewhere on here, so that way you can see it, but these are the 2 books I want to read. Literally all that I know, I think I've read like half of the first chapter, is that the main character can communicate with like this nightmare type character that's kind of trapped in her mind. So she's got to navigate this dark magic, political intrigue. I don't know. All I know is that, and that I had 2 different coworkers recommend this to me on the same day. So I wrote it down. I wanted to read it. I just haven't been in the right headspace for it up until now. And so hopefully I read that this year. We'll see. You'll hopefully see that coming up soon. This next one, this is another series that I have wanted to read. And the premise sounds very interesting, but that's all I got. The Midwinter Queen series. I don't know the names of the other books or if there's like a series name. All I know is that it starts with a woman who flees her husband, who happens to be a ruthless king. She and her newborn baby run away, and she's trying to escape him. And then he sends his best guards after her to try to catch her, and I'm assuming either kill her or bring her back. I don't know. But that's literally the only premise that I've got. And I'm assuming that somewhere in there, because it's classified as a fantasy romance, that she meets someone along the way. That sounds like there's plenty of political drama that's probably going on. I wouldn't be surprised if she like flees to an enemy kingdom or something. So I like those interesting premises like that. Like that sounds very original to me. So I definitely want to give that one a try. I just haven't picked it up yet, and it's just there have been other books that have come up, and so that is one. I think I'm hoping to read that one here soon. Next one is The Fallen Kingdom. This was a book, I'm not gonna lie, I saw it on TikTok and it seemed like such a good idea. I'm a little bit torn because when I looked it up on Goodreads, the ratings weren't great. They were actually kind of terrible, but the idea was so interesting to me. It kind of felt like Selection meets Hunger Games. Basically, the TikTok showed that like there's a princess that has to marry for the benefit of her kingdom. So she has to choose between 3 different princes, and she, you know, the one that she hates the most is inevitably probably the one that she's going to end up with, and kind of like an enemies to lovers type thing. I just want to see what it's about. I was very intrigued. It piqued my interest. So I know going into it, the reviews are not great, and we'll see how I feel. I will let you know. It may or may not be a DNF. I'm kind of crazy in the sense that I have a really hard time DNFing books, even if I think they're terrible. So that is The Fallen Kingdom. We'll see how I feel about it. This next one is Us Dark Few by Alexis Patton. I also found this one off of TikTok. Kind of seemed like a cool world that I wanted to learn about. I think this is one where she's like in a prison and trying to break out, and that's how the story starts. Very Throne of Glass coded, except I know in Throne of Glass it's like a little bit that way, but not really. I think this one takes a little bit more place in the prison to start. So that's Us Dark Few. I think this one is a series as well. I'll make sure all of the books are linked if it is, or I'll show them on the screen if it is a series, but that is Us Dark Few. Okay, next, you're gonna laugh so hard. So I just this year, within the past year, I've picked up my first Sarah J. Maas book, and it was Akatar. So I read the Akatar series, or at least the first 3. And then at the end of this year, I read Throne of Glass. I think I talked about that in the first couple videos that I was reading. But those are the only 2 Sarah J. Maas books I've read. And I know that there is a Sarah J. Maas universe, whatever, Sarah J. Maasiverse?
Massiverse.
Anyways, there's a whole universe of books that kind of take place in the same multiverse or whatever you want to call it. But I want to pick up and read the Crescent City series. I believe it's a trilogy. I'm not sure if it's finished yet. Literally, I am actually so impressed with myself because I don't know a single thing about this series other than that it exists in this multiverse with ACOTAR and Throne of Glass. My sister-in-law loves Sarah J. Maas and has nothing but good things to say. I have seen little rumblings and grumblings, but I kind of just scroll past like on TikTok or on YouTube. Like I haven't watched anything or I haven't consumed any content about this series. So I don't even know the names of the main characters. I know there's a Bryce in there. I'm not even sure. I think he's I'm assuming he's one of the male main characters, but I could be totally wrong. I don't know. That's like all the information I have, but I'm pretty confident. I like Sarah J. Maas and her writing, so I feel like not knowing anything, I can still get into that series pretty easily. So I'm planning on reading the Crescent City trilogy this year. We'll see how that goes. Okay, this next one is kind of fun with Wicked that has just come out, the movie adaptation of the Broadway musical. We were kind of talking about like, well, what is the original story? Where does it come from? Is it the movie? Was it, and I know like the play or the Broadway musical was based off of the movie, but we also kind of figured out that like there's maybe a book involved. So I was like, well, what if I read the Wizard of Oz series? Turns out that series is like 15 books long and it kind of covers like every single character in there. So I've decided I want to at least read The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L Frank Baum. I at least want to read that one because I'm pretty sure that's what the story of like Dorothy and her story follows and covers. I also want to read the book Wicked by Gregory Maguire, which I believe was the book that the Broadway musical was based off of. And it wasn't written by L Frank Baum, who created the world, but it's kind of exploring that. So I want to find the books that preface the movie and the musical, and I want to read them. And so I'm hoping that those are the ones that I could figure out. But who knows, maybe I will read all 15 books written by L Frank Baum, and it'll be a great time and I'll be just an expert on all things Oz. Who knows? But I want to explore that series and kind of that world a little bit more. We are shifting gears a little bit. All of these other ones have either been contemporary or fantasy romance or fantasy. We're going to switch into a little bit more of a historical, literary fiction, memoir, some thrillers. So I'll kind of list them off as I go, but this next one is called All the Light We Cannot See. Again, recommended by a coworker. Sometimes I'll work night shift and we all bring the books we're working on and we will talk about them. And like on those shifts when I'm working a night or I'm there late, I'll add like 5 books to my TBR because I'm like, oh, that looks good and that looks good. Literally that happened like 2 weeks ago and I've read 2 of the books that we talked about since then, which I will be talking about in my January video. I think that video will have already come out by the time I post this. So anyways, but All the Light We Cannot See, it is a historical fiction. I'm pretty sure there's a Netflix series about it too, but I haven't seen it and I want to read the book before I dive into that world as well. My understanding is it takes place in the time of World War II. It follows a young girl from France who is blind and then a young German boy who is serving in the military, and their lives kind of collide in a very unexpected way. Don't ask me what that unexpected way is. I have no idea. I haven't read the book yet. I think 3 of my coworkers had read the book when we were talking about it, and they all said they bawled like a little baby. And so this is kind of like if I'm in the mood for some deep feels and I'm ready to like feel something, it's going to be this book that I want to read. So All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. I am going to butcher that. Just don't judge the pronunciation. I've never been good at it. But if you know how to correctly say that, let me know. This next one is Little Fires Everywhere. This is a literary fiction, from what I could understand, by Celeste Ng. This follows 2 families who have vastly different values in this small little town and explores the clash of these values. And then there are some explosive events that happen within the town. From my understanding, you're exploring the reactions and how these 2 different families cope with said event that occurs, which I don't know what the event is. I don't know how it is, but that is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. I don't know. It piqued my interest. It's not up my regular alley of books that I would want to pick up, but sometimes I really want a change of pace. So I think that book is going to be reserved for when I'm feeling a little burnt out from my usual style and I want to try something new. So Little Fires Everywhere. This next one is a memoir. It is The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. This is a story. It's written by Corrie ten Boom. It's her story and her experience in World War II when her family took in Jewish families to hide them, and they were caught. And so Corrie ten Boom and her family also served in concentration camps. And so this memoir is her experience of that whole thing. I think there's a lot to learn from history. And I went to the Holocaust Museum with my family a few years ago. And honestly, it really struck me just learning about history and exploring that, not just that time frame, but just like our past, I think really helps us with the future. And so learning about World War II, learning about the Holocaust, keeping it fresh in our mind, I think is very important. And so this is a book I love personal experiences. It makes it a lot easier for me to read historical books like that. Like, I don't do well with the historical nonfiction. My family loves it. I struggle with it. So I think learning in more of that story format, following like someone's experience, sounds very appealing to me. So this is another one. I have a feeling it's going to have a lot of feels. I want to read this one. This is also one that my sister-in-law recommended. She's read it like 2 or 3 times, and she has a couple different versions or a couple different physical copies of this book. So this is one that I want to read. It is The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. Next book, we are kind of transitioning to the last category. This is our mystery and thriller category. This first one that I want to read is How to Solve Your Own Murder. This was recommended by a friend. She loves mysteries and thrillers and said this one gave off very much like a Glass Onion mystery vibe, or maybe even just a Knives Out vibe. I think this one was Knives Out. There's another book that's like Glass Onion. But this one is where there's this woman, and when she's young, she meets with a fortune teller who tells her that she's going to be murdered. So for the rest of this woman's life, she's like constantly trying to solve her own murder and like figure out who's going to kill her. So she's collecting data on all these people. And so she tries to like leave the clues. And I think if I remember this correctly, my friend was telling me that she kind of left like all of her inheritance for whoever could correctly solve the murderer. And so her niece, obviously, she's sad about her aunt. I don't know. But she's sad about her aunt, I am assuming. But she's also trying to solve this murder so that way she can unlock the inheritance side of things. And so apparently, yeah, anyways, it just seems like a fun vibe. So the murder has happened. We're trying to solve it. But you kind of get a little bit of insight before the murder as well. The next set of books that I want to read, I believe it's a series. It's the Housemaid is Watching series. I haven't read it, but it's pretty popular from my understanding. I think they're even making either a TV show or a movie about it. But the Housemaid series I know nothing about it other than it's really good. And so I'm guessing someone has a secret somewhere. Probably multiple people have secrets. Probably someone dies, and I've heard that it gives the vibe of a true crime podcast. So I want to read that series. I believe that's 3 books right there, and I'll make sure you can see all of them. This next one is called Big Little Lies. This takes place in wealthy California. You're following kind of that California mom aesthetic, and everything isn't as it seems. Lots of twists and turns along the way. There's a few different crimes that happen, and you're following these different moms. That's all I know. But it seemed like a good mystery thriller, and it had good reviews. So this is one that I want to read. Okay, last book. It is the murder mystery book of the century. I think. It's an Agatha Christie, and Then There Were None. I have heard so many different people say that this book is just like Glass Onion. Actually, let's rephrase that. I have heard so many people say that Glass Onion is just like this book because this book came first. This book was the OG. My understanding is that there are 10 people that are stuck on a remote little island, and people keep dying, and they all have their secrets. No one is completely clean. They've all got their secrets that they're trying to hide, but people keep dying, so we're trying to figure out who is killing people, what is going on. Oh my word. It is giving Glass Onion. It is giving such a great time. So that is probably, of the mysteries and the thrillers on this list, that is my top mystery thriller. The first one I'm probably going to pick up will be this one, just because I loved Glass Onion. I loved Knives Out. I personally think they were really well done. I can't say if they were copying these books or anything. I don't know. but I do know as an objective third-party observer that has only seen the movies, I loved them. And so we'll see if I feel like Glass Onion like super copied, or I don't know. But And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie is probably my top anticipated mystery thriller of this coming year. So that is that. These were my books on my TBR. I'm personally really excited. Obviously, the TBR can be as long as we want it to be, right? And so if you have any books that are similar to these or based off of my previous videos that you've seen that you think I would like, please recommend them to me. I will happily add them to my TBR. Let me know in the comments if there's anything you'd like to see, and I will see you next time. Thank you.